June 6, 1944, at 0:15 hours. Inside Strongpoint WN62 on Omaha Beach, Gaffreter Heinrich Sevelot meticulously cleaned the barrel of his MG-42 machine gun within a concrete bunker overlooking the English Channel. In his pocket lay a letter from his girlfriend in Metzingen, assuring him she would wait for him until victory was achieved. The invasion would prove to be their graveyard. Just 3 days prior, Sevelot had written those ominous words after Field Marshal Rommel himself inspected their defensive positions. During the visit, Rommel peered through Sevelot's gun aperture, assessed the overlapping fields of fire, and nodded approvingly. "When they arrive," Rommel declared, "this beach will be their tomb." Sevelot held onto this reassurance as he gazed into the tranquil darkness over the channel that night. In 12 hours, this same soldier would be found sobbing uncontrollably in his bunker, surrounded by 13,500 empty shell casings. His weapon's barrel had twisted while he watched an invasion force so immense it overwhelmed his senses. Although Sevelot would later claim to have caused 1,000 to 2,000 casualties, historians dispute this due to the approximate total of 24,000 American casualties at Omaha Beach from all sources. The calculations of German defeat were destined to be recorded not in strategic analyses or intelligence reports, but through the bewildered accounts of soldiers who would witness history's largest amphibious invasion from the opposite side of a gun sight. The Atlantic Wall stretched for 24,000 miles from Norway to the Spanish border, which German propaganda hailed as the most formidable defensive line ever created. Along the Normandy coast alone, 58 divisions of varying quality manned positions that had consumed 17 million cubic meters of concrete and 1.2 million tons of steel. Hitler himself declared it impregnable. The extensive fortifications at Omaha Beach exemplified this confidence. According to records from the U.S. Army Center of Military History, German forces had built 8 reinforced bunkers, 35 pillboxes, 4 artillery emplacements, 18 anti-tank gun positions, 45 rocket launcher sites, and a total of 6 mortar pits. The coastline had transformed into a battlefield with over 37,000 obstacles installed in the tidal area, including Belgian gates, Czech hedgehogs, and wooden stakes, some adorned with telemines. Beyond the beaches lay an extensive minefield of approximately 6.5 million mines, despite Rommel's desire for as many as 60 million. Colonel Ernst Goth, who oversaw the 916th Grenadier Regiment near Bayeux, had meticulously calculated his sector's defensive capabilities. His 4 artillery batteries could theoretically fire up to 120 rounds per minute into the beach zones. When combined with other battery units, this firepower posed a significant threat to any invasion attempt. However, these calculations were based on an assumption of unlimited ammunition, which would later prove problematic. On June 5th, weather conditions deteriorated so severely that Luftwaffe meteorologist Walter Stuber in Paris declared them unsuitable for an invasion. Wind speeds reached between 20 and 25 knots, waves grew to 6 feet high, and low clouds hung at around 500 feet. Using data from U-boats and weather stations, Stuber assured the command that these conditions would persist for at least 2 weeks. Many senior officers left their posts due to this forecast. Rommel himself had traveled to Germany on June 5th to celebrate his wife's birthday, carrying gray suede shoes he bought in Paris. General Friedrich Dahlmann, commanding the 7th Army, had ordered division commanders to attend war games at Rennes. Even naval patrols that typically patrolled the channel were suspended due to rough seas. This reliance on meteorological predictions would turn out to be a significant German oversight. Unbeknownst to Stuber, the Allies operated weather stations in Greenland and conducted weather flights over the Atlantic, which detected a brief window of favorable conditions amidst the storm. Group Captain James Stagg identified this 36-hour opportunity, and Eisenhower acted decisively on it. At 23:15 hours on June 5th, radar installations along the Norman coast began registering unusual activity. Freya and Wuisberg radars picked up massive aerial formations approaching from the north. Radar operators had previously observed similar patterns from Allied deception missions intended to keep German forces alert. By 30 hours on June 6th, reports started pouring in that contradicted all previous assumptions. Fallschirmjäger, or paratroopers, were landing in various parts of Normandy, but the reports were chaotic and contradictory. Units reported sightings to both the east and west, with some identifying them as British while others claimed they were American. The addition of dummy parachutists equipped with firecrackers, part of Operations Titanic and Rupert, further compounded the confusion. Major Hans von Luck, commanding the 125th Panzer Grenadier Regiment within the 21st Panzer Division, was one of the first to comprehend the severity of the situation. He had been awakened by reports of paratroopers near his position and promptly requested permission to launch an attack. However, he received orders from division headquarters instructing him not to move until the situation became clearer. In his memoir, Panzer Commander, von Luck would later write, "At that moment, I knew we were doomed." The paratroops clearly indicated the flanks for a larger invasion force, and every minute they waited allowed the Allies more time to fortify their positions. On June 6th at 530 hours, as dawn began to break over the channel, German observers on the coast reported something that was completely unexpected. Werner Pluskart's presence near the coast remains debated by some historians, including Heinrich Sevelat. In certain accounts, he is credited with being one of the first to report the massive naval armada approaching. What cannot be disputed is that German observers along the entire Normandy coastline witnessed a sea filled with ships stretching from horizon to horizon, not just dozens or hundreds, but thousands. This fleet included vessels ranging from colossal battleships to tiny landing craft, forming an immense gray carpet across the channel. According to official Allied records, the invasion armada comprised 69 vessels, 1,213 warships, 4126 landing crafts, 736 auxiliary ships, and 864 merchant ships, the largest naval fleet ever assembled in human history. To German defenders who had been fed propaganda about Allied weakness and division, the sight was psychologically overwhelming. Bernhard Furking, an artillery officer stationed at WN-62 who would be killed later that day, allegedly told his men, "We are witnessing the entire world arriving on our doorstep." At 5:35 a.m., the naval artillery barrage began. Nothing in the German soldiers' past experiences, whether it be the Eastern Front or the heaviest RAF raids, had prepared them for what was about to unfold. The battleship USS Texas alone fired an astounding 255 shells of 14 inches in diameter at Point Du Hoc within just 34 minutes, according to records from the Naval History and Heritage Command. HMS Warspite, which initiated fire on D-Day around 5 a.m., would release over 315-inch caliber shells during the first 2 days, including a significant 96 rounds aimed at German positions on June 9th. The combined firepower of the naval armada surpassed anything previously encountered by the Wehrmacht. According to testimonies from German veterans archived by the Federal Archives in Germany, even concrete bunkers designed to withstand intense bombardment began cracking under the relentless artillery assault. Soldiers were buried alive and had to be dug out multiple times as more shells continued to fall. The psychological toll was just as severe as the physical destruction, with defenders losing faith in fortifications they once trusted completely. As the naval bombardment persisted, The Luftwaffe's response highlighted the extent of Germany's dire situation. Oberst Joseph Pips Priller, commander of Jagdgeschwader 26, received orders to attack the Allied invasion fleet with his entire force, but had only 2 planes at his disposal. This was documented in the Wing's war diary. What constituted this supposed entire force? Priller and Unteroffizier Heinz Vaderkick made a solitary strafing run on Sword Beach early in the morning of June 6th, using their FW-190 Ammonus 8 fighters before retreating due to overwhelming Allied fighter cover. Despite earlier promises of air superiority, the Luftwaffe managed only 319 sorties on D-Day against 14,674 Allied sorties, according to records from the U.S. Navy Office of Naval Intelligence. This single strafing mission by 2 planes against an invasion force comprising thousands became a symbol of German powerlessness. The night skies that were expected to darken under swarms of Luftwaffe fighters turned out to be filled with futile gestures instead. At 6:30 a.m., the first assault waves landed on the beaches. Despite the heavy bombardment, German defenders manned their positions and returned fire. What ensued was a level of carnage that shocked even those who had seen extensive combat action. At 635 hours, Heinrich Sevelat, stationed as a machine gunner at WN-62, initiated his firing. His position remained one of the few untouched by the earlier bombardment and offered an unobstructed view across Omaha Beach. In his memoir titled WN-62, Irina Rungin and Omaha Beach, published in 2005, Sevelat recounted firing a staggering 13,500 rounds over 9 hours. Despite his claims of causing massive casualties, military historians attribute the high number of deaths to multiple factors, rather than solely crediting Sevelat's position. Nevertheless, his MG-42 rifle, capable of firing up to 1,200 rounds per minute in short bursts, played a significant role in creating the notorious Bloody Omaha. The German defenders experienced what military historians would later describe as material shock, a mental collapse brought on by facing an overwhelming force. Regardless of how many American, British, or Canadian soldiers were killed, more seemed to appear continuously. Each destroyed landing craft was swiftly replaced by 3 new ones. Every silenced machine gun position was quickly neutralized by relentless naval gunfire. By midday, German forces reported critical shortages in ammunition. The initial defensive plans had underestimated the scale of the attack and overestimated their ability to manage supplies. According to Wehrmacht supply records, positions that were supposed to hold out for 3 days depleted their ammunition reserves within a few hours. Artillery batteries, which formed the backbone of the German defense, faced similar crises as their carefully rationed ammunition was rapidly consumed by the intensity of combat. Efforts to reinforce these depleted supplies with reserve stocks failed due to constant Allied air attacks on all routes. The disparity in firepower between the Allies and Germans became increasingly evident. American destroyers would unleash hundreds of shells at individual targets, whereas German artillery units were restricted to no more than 4 rounds per gun daily by D-Day afternoon. The German Armored Reserve, which Field Marshal Rommel had stressed must be deployed against any invasion force on the beaches, remained inactive during the crucial morning hours. The 21st Panzer Division, the sole armored unit near the coast, did not receive orders to engage until 10 o'clock in the morning, 4 hours after the initial landings began. When the division finally launched an attack at 4:20 p.m., it advanced between British airborne landing zones towards the coastline. According to their records, they reached the shore somewhere between Lyon-Summer and Luxembourg around 7 p.m., becoming the only German armored unit to reach the coast on D-Day. However, by 9 p.m., Operation Mallard's arrival of 250 gliders delivering reinforcements to the British 6th Airborne Division prompted their retreat due to concerns about threats to their flanks. The division suffered losses amounting to 54 tanks and armored vehicles on D-Day, roughly a quarter of its strength in just one day. The counterattack also faced unfamiliar Allied armor. Hobart's funnies, which included modified tanks equipped with mine flails, flamethrowers, and bridge-laying equipment. These vehicles appeared like relics from another era of warfare. Throughout D-Day, German units encountered an unprecedented threat in the form of large-scale airborne forces operating behind their lines. The British 6th Airborne Division and the American 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions created widespread chaos that effectively multiplied their combat strength. Oberst Friedrich von der Heydter, Germany's most experienced paratrooper commander at the time, serving with the 6th Fallschirmjäger Regiment in Normandy during the invasion, provided a damning assessment of the Allied airborne operation post-war. According to him, it was everything that German forces had never managed: massive, coordinated, and logistically supported. Whereas Germany typically dropped battalions, the Allies deployed divisions en masse. While German units were supplied by single aircraft, the Allies had an unending stream of gliders and transport planes providing reinforcements. The psychological impact of paratroopers appearing everywhere paralyzed German responses. Some units refused to move out of fear of ambushes. Others fired upon shadows or even their own comrades. This confusion compounded German difficulties exponentially as D-Day progressed, leading to a breakdown in command and control structures. Allied aircraft methodically targeted communication infrastructure. French resistance fighters, spurred by clandestine BBC messages, severed telephone cables and dismantled relay stations. Radio transmissions were disrupted by Allied electronic warfare teams. General Lieutenant Max Pemsel, Chief of Staff for the 7th Army, struggled to orchestrate defensive measures from his command center in Le Mans. His war diary documents growing exasperation as contact with frontline units diminished. By midday, entire divisions had vanished from communication networks. Isolated unit leaders made tactical decisions without situational awareness or broader context. As night fell on June 6th, surviving German defenders assessed their predicament. The seemingly impregnable Atlantic Wall had been breached at multiple locations. The Luftwaffe's air superiority over Normandy was essentially non-existent. The Kriegsmarine managed to sink one destroyer, USS Corrie, but lost 15 E-boats and many smaller vessels. General Lieutenant Wilhelm Richter, commanding the 716th Division, which had endured the brunt of the British assault, reported back to 7th Army headquarters. His division's combat effectiveness was down to 35%. All coastal strongholds were captured. Artillery losses stood at 90%, and enemy forces were advancing inland. The numbers revealed a tale of tactical collapse despite individual acts of bravery. In just one day, German forces suffered casualties comparable to those in major battles, while the Allies continued landing reinforcements as if D-Day was merely an opening move rather than the climax. Throughout the night from June 6th to July 7th, German units attempted regrouping and counterattacks, only to expose the full extent of Allied superiority. Each German maneuver was promptly detected by radar, illuminated by parachute flares, and obliterated by artillery or naval gunfire. Hans von Lux's Panzer Grenadiers launched a counterattack in the dark, but were quickly spotted by airborne illumination devices and faced intense fire from offshore destroyers. Visibility was so clear that every vehicle and soldier could be seen distinctly. The barrage of shells from the sea struck with pinpoint accuracy, causing significant casualties without any engagement with Allied ground troops. The Germans suffered severe losses even before they had sighted a single enemy combatant. Meanwhile, Allied reinforcements kept arriving steadily. Artificial harbors were being constructed along the shore, and supply ships anchored in well-organized formations. The invasion was not merely advancing. It was establishing itself as an enduring presence on French soil. When German reinforcements tried to reach Normandy, they encountered relentless interference at every turn. Roads, railways, and bridges remained under constant assault. According to Wehrmacht transportation logs, units that were expected to cover the distance in a single day often took up to 2 weeks to arrive. The 2nd SS Panzer Division, Das Reich, which was stationed near Toulouse, required 17 days for its journey. A trip that should have taken just 3 days ended with 30% of their vehicles being destroyed by aerial attacks without engaging in any ground combat. This situation had a profound psychological effect on the German forces. If they could not even reach the battlefield intact, how could they realistically expect to make an impact? Incredibly efficient logistics supported Allied operations. LSDs, landing ships capable of transporting tanks, unloaded entire armored regiments within hours. Just days after D-Day, the Allies were unloading 15,000 tons of supplies daily, a rate surpassing what the German army in Normandy used in an entire week. By June 12, German troops in Normandy faced a psychological breaking point. They had suffered over 26,000 casualties, equivalent to about 2 full divisions, and reinforcements were scarce. In contrast, Allied strength continuously grew by the hour. On June 12, Kärnten fell, connecting Utah and Omaha beaches. The elite German paratroopers of the 6th Parachute Regiment, who had never before retreated, withdrew in disarray. Their commander, Friedrich von der Heydter, reported to his superiors that his regiment was no longer a combat unit. Its survivors were psychologically shattered. On June 13, SS Obersturmführer Michael Wittmann secured one of the few German tactical victories in Normandy. According to British military records, he destroyed 13 to 14 tanks, 2 anti-tank guns, and 13 to 15 personnel carriers within just 15 minutes during the Battle of Villers-Bocage. Despite this triumph, German propaganda seized it as evidence that their arms could still dominate. However, even this victory underscored the futility of Germany's position. Wittmann's disabled Tiger tank was difficult for the Germans to replace, while British losses were replenished within hours. The tactical prowess of individual German soldiers could not counteract industrial logistics. Wittmann himself, credited with 138 confirmed tank kills across all fronts, died on August 8 when his Tiger tank was destroyed. Whether by Northamptonshire Yeomanry gunner Joe Ikins or Canadian forces remains uncertain. The most renowned tank ace in the Wehrmacht met his end at the hands of an adversary capable of exchanging 10 tanks for a single Tiger. The capture of Cherbourg on June 26 dealt another significant psychological blow. This heavily fortified port city, which had been under construction for 4 years and was defended by 21,000 soldiers, was expected to hold out for months. However, it fell within just 5 days of intense combat. General Karl Wilhelm von Schlieben, the garrison commander who vowed to defend Cherbourg until his last bullet, surrendered on June 26. During his post-war interrogation, he stated that resistance had become futile in the face of an enemy with seemingly limitless resources, a sentiment echoed repeatedly in German accounts of Normandy. Operation Cobra commenced on July 25 and dealt a decisive blow to the German forces entrenched in Normandy. According to official U.S. Army Air Forces records, the preparatory bombardment included 15 3 heavy bombers, 380 medium bombers, and 550 fighter bombers, dropping over 41 tons of bombs into an area measuring just 7,000 yards wide by 25 yards deep. Lieutenant General Fritz Baylen, commander of the Panzer Lehr Division, reported to Army Group B that his division was virtually wiped out. The psychological impact on the surviving soldiers was devastating. They were no longer capable of functioning as combatants, but rather as broken men. The intensity of the bombing campaign even claimed the life of Lieutenant General Leslie McNear, the highest-ranking American officer killed in Europe, who had been observing from a perceived safe distance. If American generals couldn't escape their own firepower, what chance did German soldiers have? The Falaise pocket between August 12 and 21 became a graveyard for German forces in Normandy. According to Allied intelligence corroborated by post-war German records, approximately 10,000 Germans perished in the pocket, while another 50,000 were taken prisoner. Over 300 tanks and armored vehicles were destroyed along with 25 other vehicles. Soldiers attempting escape described scenes of utter devastation. Roads strewn with dead horses and burning wreckage. Allied fighter-bombers struck in successive waves every 20 minutes, while artillery barrages continued non-stop. The extent of the devastation was so overwhelming that many soldiers surrendered rather than face certain death. The tally from the Normandy campaign underscores a decisive German defeat. Between June 6 and August 31, German casualties amounted to around 320,000, including approximately 30,000 killed, 80,000 wounded, and 210,000 missing or captured. Additionally, nearly all of the armored vehicles in France were destroyed, 23 tanks lost, and over 21 aircraft were downed. Meanwhile, Allied losses stood at roughly 209,672 soldiers, with replacements swiftly filling the void daily. In terms of equipment, about 4,000 tanks and 41 aircraft were lost by the Allies, which were replenished within weeks from a total force of around 13,000 planes. This stark disparity highlighted a critical truth. Germany was engaged in an attrition battle that it could not hope to win against an opponent with nearly inexhaustible reserves. Professional German military officers provided candid evaluations of the calamity. Heinrich Eberbach, who took command after Erwin Rommel's injury, reported to the High Command on August 1st, stating that the enemy's superiority in artillery was at least 20-1 and 10-1 in tanks, with an overwhelming advantage in air power. He noted that the Allies could replace their losses within days, whereas Germany had no capacity for such rapid replacement. Hans Spadel, Rommel's chief of staff, elaborated on this theme in his 1949 memoirs. Normandy demonstrated that courage alone cannot triumph over industrial might. Facing an adversary who had mechanized not just warfare but victory itself, he concluded that the struggle was becoming increasingly untenable. In a final report to Hitler on July 15th, 2 days before being critically injured by Allied aircraft, Rommel wrote, "The troops are fighting heroically everywhere, yet this uneven battle is nearing its end." The enemy's overwhelming advantage in manpower and resources is now becoming evident, and I urge you to swiftly draw the appropriate conclusions. This was essentially a coded message indicating total defeat. Rommel, Germany's celebrated general, informed Hitler that the war was lost. The Normandy campaign demonstrated that World War II had transformed into a battle of production capabilities. German soldiers encountered American industrial prowess that left them bewildered. Ford's Willow Run facility produced one B-24 bomber every 63 minutes at its peak output. In 1944, American factories churned out 96,000 aircraft. The amount of ammunition used by the Allies in a single day surpassed German production over an entire month. A single American division consumed more supplies daily than an entire German corps could provide. Hans von Luck wrote about his experiences during the Normandy campaign in his memoirs, stating that they learned modern warfare was not solely about tactics or bravery, but rather about industrial might. The Americans had turned war into a manufacturing process. Those German soldiers who survived the ordeal were profoundly impacted psychologically. They witnessed the total invalidation of everything they believed about warfare, racial superiority, and national purpose. Heinrich Sevelat, a machine gunner stationed at WN-62, was haunted by his D-Day experiences for the rest of his life. In his 2005 memoir, he recounted meeting American veterans and realized that they were all young men caught in an industrial slaughterhouse where their efforts paled in comparison to the endless supply of replacements provided by the Americans. Friedrich von der Heydter, a paratrooper commander during the war, later became a professor of international law after the conflict ended. He noted that Normandy signaled the end of the era of warrior heroes. Warfare had evolved into an industrial endeavor, and we found ourselves pitted against the world's foremost industrial power with outdated tactics and dreams. For the Germans, D-Day was not just a military defeat, but a profound ideological and psychological collapse. Soldiers who had conquered much of Europe realized that their assumptions about their enemies, their cause, and their own capabilities were fundamentally flawed. They anticipated facing weak, divided democracies only to confront an alliance that had transformed warfare into an industrial process of unparalleled efficiency. They witnessed the power of democratic nations' armaments firsthand. Endless fleets of ships, planes, tanks, and supplies pouring forth from factories whose output surpassed German comprehension. The German defenders in Normandy learned that modern war was not won on battlefields but in factories, not by the bravest soldiers, but by the most industrially advanced societies. They saw that the Western Allies had redefined warfare as a mathematical equation where production statistics held more significance than tactical genius. On June 6th, Heinrich Sevelat started the day confident the invasion would be repelled within hours. By its end, he found himself amidst countless empty shell casings, witnessing unending waves of Allied reinforcements landing on the beach his position was supposed to control. Sevelat's experience encapsulated the broader German tragedy in Normandy. Tactical successes were overwhelmed by strategic impossibility. The beaches of Normandy served as both a battlefield and a revelation. Here, German soldiers encountered the future of warfare, which belonged to those societies capable of producing the most material with maximum efficiency. They had brought courage, training, and determination to the fight, while the Allies supplied an inexhaustible industrial output. In attempting to halt the Allied invasion, the German defenders might as well have been trying to stop the rising tide. They fired until their weapons melted from heat, fought until they ran out of ammunition, yet watched helplessly as the Allies continued to deliver more of everything. The mathematics of contemporary warfare made their bravery obsolete. On D-Day, German soldiers confronted a harsh lesson from history. In an era defined by industrial conflict, countries unable to rival their adversaries' output were destined for defeat, irrespective of their troops' prowess or dedication. They started the day as combatants of the Third Reich and concluded it as spectators to the overwhelming might of democratic nations. Their downfall was not merely military but comprehensive, a devastating demonstration that Nazi notions of racial superiority and military dominance could not withstand the reality of Allied industrial supremacy. The invasion they vowed to repel ultimately overwhelmed them, dispelling any remaining hopes of German triumph.